Is Washington Business Report with ABC7 national correspondent Rebecca Cooper.
Well, we heard it 30 years ago from Mel Brooks. It's good to be king. And around these parts in the here and now, it's good to be Fairfax County, particularly if you're involved with economic development. As well as having some of the highest incomes and businesses in the Washington area. Earlier this month, Fairfax announced Bechtel, one of the world's largest engineering firms, would relocate its corporate headquarters to Reston from Montgomery County. Jerry Gordon is the president and CEO of the Fairfax County Economic Development Authority. Welcome to Washington Business Report.
Thanks, Rebecca.
We're going to get to Bechtel in a moment. We'll make Governor O'Malley wait to hear what you all did to lure them away from Rockville. But first I want to talk about a new book that you've written that I have to say, for a boring title, it's a really good read. Reinventing Local and Regional Economies. And I give you credit, you interviewed several dozen mayors from around the country and found some of the best examples across the United States of ways that local municipalities can reinvent their economy. So I have to say, I really highly recommend this book. I took it home to glance through it and found myself engrossed in examples from the Bronx to Tulsa, Oklahoma, to all kinds of different examples. We don't have time to go through all of them today, so I wanted to take a look at some of the local success stories. In one of the sections, section 2, where you talk about before you can grow your economy, sometimes you have to reinvent your economy. And you talk about Baltimore, and you give the example of the Baltimore Harbor. Tell us what you mean by that.
Well, too many communities in this country have waited until they're really in desperate situations, and that's sort of what happened at the Inner Harbor in Baltimore. It was a terrible situation.
People don't remember.
Exactly.
The Baltimore Harbor was, people would call it the armpit of Maryland.
Crime-ridden.
And now it's amazing.
Yeah.
But it took a lot of community involvement to get that to happen. Tell us what you found when you talked to people there.
Well, normally these things start in the local government. This one started with the local government and the business community and the residential community as well.
And even the church community, I remember. There were local ministers out there trying to lobby to get this commercial development on the harbor.
Exactly. It was a blight on an otherwise exciting city that was doing some great things, looking forward, and it really needed its harbor to be its focal point. And they've made that happen. It's a terrific location.
And it transformed the whole downtown Baltimore region. Places where nobody wanted to live are now some of the most expensive.
And ripples in a stream, so that the next blocks from the Inner Harbor then became developed well as also, and further out even.
In section 3, you have several chapters about some of the basic foundations that any municipality needs to generate good economic revenues for all their businesses. And again, we had some good local examples. Diversification, Fairfax County. You talked about how for decades Fairfax County was entirely dependent on the federal government. Back in the 1970s, you say, they tried to change that, but it wasn't easy to turn that ship.
And it never is, and there are communities like this. For us, the single dominant sector was federal government. For Seattle, it was aerospace and Boeing. For Pittsburgh, it was steel. You cannot survive, you cannot sustain an economy well into the future on one dominant industry or one dominant employer.
But then Fairfax County became the new Silicon Valley, and then the bubble burst. Michael Saylor from MicroStrategy is often cited as a guy who lost as much money in a single day as Bill Gates when the bubble burst. Was Fairfax County in trouble when that happened?
Well, we were in trouble in the sense that we were entirely susceptible to changes in federal procurement. And we no longer are. In the last 3 or 4 years, we've had Hilton Worldwide, Volkswagen North America, Bechtel all come in, completely diversifying the economy and smoothing out those recessional changes.
Well, so let's get to Bechtel, because that was a big get. They had hundreds of jobs in Rockville that they've now moved to Reston. Governor O'Malley put up several $1 million to keep some of the jobs from Bechtel from leaving and staying in Maryland. But Virginia also gave several $1 million in incentives, and there's been some strong criticism in the press. The Washington Post headline saying those incentives were not necessary. The Washington Business Journal criticizing you on 2 fronts, saying the incentives were not what caused Bechtel to move and they were a waste of taxpayers' money. And our friend Doug Fruehling at the Washington Business Journal saying there wasn't enough transparency. What happened? How did you get Bechtel, and was it money well spent?
Well, I think it was money well spent, because you do get to the point where that money doesn't make the decision, but it does help the company offset certain costs that are
but now
specific
you're
to
helping,
a move.
this is the criticism in the press, you've got this multi-billion-dollar company, and the taxpayers of Fairfax County are helping them buy new furniture for their headquarters when they've got all that profit.
The taxpayers of Fairfax County didn't put up a dime. The state of Virginia paid some incentives to Bechtel, but Fairfax County did not, and has never put up a dollar of
Point well
cash.
made. This was a Governor McDonnell incentive. Okay, so now defend yourself to the Arlington County and everyone else who says, why are we helping a billion-dollar company buy office furniture?
Well, the state of Virginia does have a very meager, if you look at the neighboring states, Maryland's incentive funds are considerably more well-financed, and North Carolina, even Tennessee, has huge funds to contribute for incentives. Virginia has a smallish fund.
But do you agree with some of the experts who say that incentives aren't that dollar incentives aren't the main reason why a company like Bechtel would choose to relocate?
No, of course not. A company like Bechtel uses these incentives to offset marginal costs that are specific to the move. They're not moving because they got some dollars from the Commonwealth of Virginia, but it does help to sweeten the deal. It helps to make sure that they do get into the community and get started.
And lastly, we're running out of time. There were so many great examples in the book of things that you saw as success stories throughout the country. Any one or two that stand out that really surprised you and that you want to replicate here in our region?
Well, I think the rest of the country is so different, but there are a number of success stories in areas. Seattle clearly is a success story, having come back from a devastating early 1970s where they almost went out of business.
What's the one lesson you learned from the Seattle example?
Diversification of the economy and an aggressive bridge between the public sector, the private sector, and the universities to make those things happen.
Dr. Jerry Gordon, you were 2010's Business Leader of the Year because of the ideas that you bring to Fairfax County, and we thank you for sharing them today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. And we've got more ahead after the break. The spotlight's on a small business stepping out in style.